What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the after credit scene. We are talking about season 2 of Loki, specifically episode 1. Now, before we get into anything, please like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so when we drop new content, you'll be the first one to find out about it. And then spread this thing all across the multiverse. Now, as luck would have it, normally after 2 months, I would have been chomping at the bit to get back with you guys with some more Marvel content, but it's 4 days late, 5 days late, because in this multiverse, I was not healthy enough to do so. It came down with a sinus infection. So if you love the content, subscribe. And if not, give me a like and a subscription purely out of pity because I've been laid up sick for the last 4 days. Because of that, not going to spend a whole lot of time talking through the episode and doing a breakdown of the episode. I'll throw a few Easter eggs in there. But what I really want to talk about is some of the multiverse elements. Now, for starters, if you want to watch it ahead of time, click on the video that's linked up here at the top. This is what I would consider a definitive explanation of the multiverse with a good metaphor thrown in and a little bit of humor as well. You can watch that and come back, or you can click on it at the bottom in the comments. You can also wait till the end of this video and watch it. It'll be linked at the end of this video. But I want to talk about the multiverse because season 1 of Loki happened before a lot of the other multiverse things happened. It's what opened up the multiverse. It gave us our first experience with it. And I think there's a lot of rules that came out of that season that are going to carry on immediately into this season. And we got a lot of visuals, which is what I really love with Loki in terms of the multiverse, and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness did a little bit of it too. But I want to talk some about those things more than I want to talk about anything else. So let's get right into some of that. Now, as just a quick explanation, too long, didn't watch the other videos. The idea here, I want you to think about the multiverse as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay, so you've got bread on either side. That would be time. Everything is wrapped in time. Okay, everything that happens to us, everything in our timeline, regardless of whether it's a sacred timeline or a branch timeline, happens inside time. Now, inside time there, you have a couple different layers. Jelly layers, peanut butter layers, and once they get all smushed together, they kind of intermingle. And those can be anything from, we go into more detail in my other videos about those layers can be what the MCU has referred to as realms, realities, dark dimension, mirror dimension, Tao Lo. All those different things are intermingled where some of them you can see and some of them you can't, but they're all kind of right together. Think about portals, things like that as like toothpicks, the quantum realm as like toothpicks that go through the bread, through the jelly and the peanut butter, and you can come out the other side. That's how the Avengers were able to time travel back to different spots. It's also why, an explanation of why, like they said, the loops were things that you did in the past did not affect the future and so on and so forth. That is a key sticking point for some things that happened in episode 1 that I want us to talk about real quick. So, take that peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That is what we would call our reality, our timeline, whatever that is. What Kang says, or pardon me, what He Who Remains says at the end of Loki season 1, he says that this multiverse war was coming. That in his timeline, in his future, he came into contact with other Kangs that had done the same thing, and then it became this war where they were out for power. They started attacking each other, and so he uses this specific language, and I think it's very important moving forward. He isolated our timeline, okay? Isolated. Think of it like taking our timeline and putting it in, taking our peanut butter and jelly sandwich and putting it in some Tupperware. He isolated it. The TVA was there to make sure that other timelines did not interfere with ours, and that being that there are other timelines that have TVAs as well, and that our timeline did not branch out beyond that, thereby popping open the Tupperware, so to speak. When Sylvie kills He Who Remains, the lid to the Tupperware is effectively popped open, and all of these other branches, which have all been happening simultaneously already, all these other sandwiches that have been there, are now within our access. That's why Multiverse of Madness talks about incursions where our sandwiches are hitting each other. That's why you could go to another reality like they do in Multiverse of Madness, and someone like Christine already knows about our universe and gives it a designation. Those kind of things. They already know about those things because they've been happening simultaneously. They've either known about it from past things or they've known about it from future events. However they've known about it, it's been happening at the same time, or it has already happened and they've been observing what's been going on in ours and we've just been protected somehow. Either way, that part doesn't matter. They've always been out there. That's what I'm talking about. That's very important for the big scene we see in episode 1 of season 2, which is the temporal loom. Up until this point, and I would defy anybody, I would challenge anybody to go and try to poke holes in my metaphor, in my multiverse video, or maybe even help me add to it. I think that would be much more constructive than trying just to be critical and be a butthead on the internet. Let's work together. Let's be a community here. I tend to like it, and thus far, my peanut butter and jelly sandwich metaphor has not been proven false, and it still doesn't with this temporal loom thing. Now, when you go in, when OB, Loki, and Mobius go into this room, we get our first Easter egg of one of our Easter eggs of the episode, which is a close-up shot of this door to the room that houses the temporal loom, which you could argue is a room outside of time as well, just like the TVA, because time moves differently there. You get this look at a door that looks like the X-Men door to Cerebro that we've seen in the previous X-Men movies. So that was a really interesting nod, even if it wasn't intentional. There's a lot of back and forth here, and before we get into the temporal loom, a really quick thing to note is that this episode deals a lot with going back to the past and the future and things like that, with Loki being pulled through time, so to speak. Another Easter egg there is if you go and watch the Sony Spider-Man movies, Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, the same visual of Miles being torn apart because he's out of his universe is the same look that they give Loki. So they're kind of trying to make some connections there, or maybe they just thought it was a really good visual and they decided to steal it from Sony. Either way, that was a really cool thing as well. But it would seem as though Loki being able to travel back in time on a certain timeline and affect events in the future of that same timeline, that being where he tells OB certain things and OB in the future immediately knows, oh, well, yeah, I have met you before. Oh, I do have one of these little temporal devices with me. Seems like it would go against the things that we learned about in Endgame, that you can't go back to the past and affect things in the future. Couple of things there. One, the things that he's affecting are possibly being affected because they are outside of time, because the TVA, time works differently in the TVA. You can kind of write it off that way. When all else fails, that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to write it off as a roundabout way of saying, well, you can do that there because they're outside of time. So you're just bouncing around on this one interconnected space. I prefer the reasoning that they actually do give you in the episode, which is when Sylvie pushed Loki back into that timeline, she did so using Kang's TemPad. Now, presumably, Kang's TemPad can do everything and more that a TVA TemPad can do, which would not only mean that it can take you outside of time, inside of time, but it can take you forwards, backwards, and all the way through time. And if he's been affected by it somehow where he's actually an entity that's not connected to time, then anything that happens with him could be explained, that being memories, conversations he has. Any of those things could be affected by proximity to him and whatever happened in He Who Remains room and the use of that TemPad. Because we know from episode 6 of season 1 that He Who Remains could do a whole lot of crazy stuff with his TemPad and with his understanding of time. And so it's kind of safe to say that there's probably something else at work there that once you get outside of the TVA doesn't exactly function that way, because those kind of rules outside of the TVA, outside of time, don't actually function the same way. So you have to remember that TVA is outside of time because you're able to view it, hence the temporal loom. So when we go in and see the temporal loom, I think that the temporal loom is a perfect visual for exactly how He Who Remains isolated our timeline. So you see the world in the multiverse before He Who Remains isolated it, and you see the world after he isolated it. The temporal loom, the thing in the middle there, is how he is weaving together all of these different timelines, and anything that branches off of there is the TVA's responsibility. That's why it doesn't just go crazy, is because he's found a way to take all of these different things and put them together. The difference is that what they are discovering is that in episode 1, they're trying to still protect the sacred timeline. They're trying to keep it from exploding, from the temporal loom going crazy, so that everything is not everywhere. And because of that, there are more branches coming in than the sacred timeline can handle, than the TVA soldiers can prune on this end. So they're no longer pruning them on this end of the temporal loom, but this end is also getting way more than it should, because nobody over here on this end is slowing it down. There is not a Kang to preempt all of this that happens over here in order to create the temporal loom. They killed him. They got rid of him. He no longer exists. So he's not there to do whatever he was doing, which they never really explained. Because Loki and Sylvie did not take over his place, there's nobody there to stop all these branches so the temporal loom can continue doing its job of creating the sacred timeline and preserving that timeline so the TVA can continue doing its job of pruning everything. The lid is now off of the Tupperware, and our timeline, our sandwich, is now being bombarded with all of these different things. Now, what that looks like afterwards, if it's just, to use our metaphor, a massive table full of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches mashed together, or if it's lines upon stacks of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that you can go through that are crushing into each other. I prefer that one because I think it explains incursions and things like that. Consider your peanut butter and jelly sandwich like a submarine sandwich that just keeps going, that has a past and a present, so to speak, but there are stacks upon stacks and they can crash into each other layer upon layer. I prefer that explanation, but we haven't gotten that far yet. I love the visuals in Loki where they're explaining these things, where they are showing you visually and not just explaining through dialogue how the multiverse is working. Even using the portals, the pruning, all of those different elements being used to give you a better idea of what the multiverse looks like. To that end, I think Marvel, and here's my defense of Marvel Phase 4, 5, and 6. To that end, Marvel is laying some excellent groundwork that they did not get to do in the Infinity Gauntlet series. Those had the idea of bringing together Infinity Stones, but weaving Thanos into that and talking about him, it was just in talk only. And after credit scenes, there was not main story dialogue, visuals, and a legacy built of a villain and something that is coming, like there is with Kang. They didn't really do that with Thanos except during Infinity War. Oh, Thanos is coming. That was great, but I imagine, I'm preempting it now, I'm prophesying it now, I imagine there are a lot of elements of Phases 4, 5, and 6 that we will look back on after Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars and say, wow, those were intentional, they were really on point, and they were a lot more essential than we gave them credit for. Something like Quantumania that people write off. I imagine that there are a lot of other series and movies and shows and things that are going to get written off, that have been written off because it's trendy to diss on Marvel these days, that are going to be a lot more important moving forward, and movies that are great right now because they were good one-offs. Guardians of the Galaxy 3, fantastic, excellent, didn't really deal with anything moving forward. So in its own right, great, excellent, top tier. But moving forward, is it going to have rewatchability when it comes to the multiverse saga? Probably not. I don't know that to be true. I'm just making some guesses, but the visuals, the rules, the explanations, the right down to the use of these doors and portals and all this conversation of incursions, you're getting this in little bitty bites, and they're doing it in a way that by the time we get to those things, you have this legacy of Kang where something's coming and you see little bits of him, different parts of him, and there's this big mythology built up already. And they've already, from the first shot of season 2, where there's a close-up of Kang's face on a big statue, they are letting you know this is all about Kang. And Marvel's going to continue to double down on it. I think they've planned it out. They are going with it. And any plans they make to right the ship from here on out are really going to be stylistic decisions, script decisions, but it's not going to be let's change the story up completely and let's throw in some cameos to make all the critics happy. They're going all the way through with this multiverse saga, and then they're going to decide what to do after that. I think this is going to be great. I like the multiverse stuff moving forward. I am super excited to see how they move forward and explain the multiverse within this smaller story of Loki, Sylvie, and the TVA and the aftermath of what's happened with Sylvie's decisions. Our final Easter egg and another explanation of the multiverse up all the way through season 1. Anytime we went to a new timeline, you saw the little scrolling numbers at the bottom and it showed you the time. This time, when Sylvie pops up in Broxton, Oklahoma, you get a scroll through of time, but you also get a little icon at the bottom that says, with a dot and a line that says alternate timeline. So she's not even in the same timeline that Loki and Sylvie started out in. Maybe not even her own. And so those little details, those little visuals, giving you explanations of where they're at, and I think it's only a matter of time until we start getting multiverse designations, Earth designations, which basically means if this is Earth 616 or Earth whatever, then that means that everything else contained within that timeline is whatever that number is. I will throw in a little controversy here for you guys, and I've said it before and I will continue to say it. I've got it all over TikTok, and you can roast me for it, you can whatever, it's my opinion, I'm sticking with it until further notice. The only person in the MCU to give a designation, actually two people, to give a designation to the timeline that we are currently in and watching is Christine in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and Mephisto from Spider-Man Far From Home. Now Mephisto, it can be argued, made it up and pulled it out of his ear, or maybe he heard it somewhere. Either way, we're going to discard his because not only is he a con artist, even though he is a scientist, but he ends up being the villain. So he could be playing with us, he could be saying something, he just makes it up. It's a throwaway line, probably an Easter egg that they didn't think much about. So gone. Christine, in Earth 838, when Strange and America go there and they get captured by the Illuminati, she says, we are Earth 838 and you are Earth 616. Now, it doesn't mean that our Earth has to call it that. Maybe our Earth calls itself Earth 19999999, but maybe they don't. The only place in the MCU that you have ever heard a designation for our timeline is in that movie, and it is Earth 616. The only other place that you have been given a designation, aside from Xochitl Gomez and Iman Vellani and anybody else, which both of them disagree with Kevin Feige, The only other place that you get an actual written down designation for our timeline is in a coffee table book back in 2009 when Iron Man first came out. And in the coffee table book, it designates the Iron Man movie taking place in Earth 1999999999. I tend to ignore that because, one, it is way early on, and two, it is a book that may or may not be authorized Marvel, I say authorized Marvel content. It may have been authorized to been made, but in terms of Kevin Feige, the scriptwriters, the people that are in charge of keeping the timeline for Marvel Studios, this is also before Disney bought Marvel Studios, it is an outside resource that is not internal to the movies and the shows themselves. And until we get an explanation there, you're just going to have to wait. And until then, that's what they call it, and that's what it is. And you can give it any kind of, they can explain it later in any other way they want to, but that's what we've got right now. There's a bunch of other little weird things that have happened within the multiverse that I have explanations for, things that happened in Miss Marvel and other places that if we want to get into that, we can. But as far as the multiverse is concerned, I am really excited for season 2 of Loki. I thought a lot of the really awesome stuff in the episode, the inclusion of OB, played by Ki-Hwa Kwan, was excellent. He is amazing. I have loved him since his Goonie days, and seeing him have this resurgence is fantastic. To win Oscars and all those kind of things is really, really cool. I think he's going to be awesome. I hope there's more of him from here on out. And I think there's a lot of really awesome stuff coming in this episode. To that end, in this series, to that end, check out. There'll be a video link at the end of this and in the description below for our predictions for episode 2 of Loki, and I highly encourage you to check that out as well. Our predictions tend to be pretty on point, and it gives you some things to look forward to, gives us the time to have some conversations before the next episode drops. And you guys can add your theories and your discussions there, and we can kind of talk about them together and see what's going on. Tell us what you guys think. If you agree with me, great. If you don't, let's work it out together. If you just disagree and you want to critique me, go right ahead. But don't be surprised if I don't comment or respond to your critiques, because I don't have time for buttheads on the internet. Looking for a community, looking to have fun, looking to put my ideas out there and help you guys and just be part of the discussion. Thank you guys for liking, subscribing. I hope you've done it. And check out some of our other content over here. We got a lot of other things you can sink your teeth into. And when the next one drops, guys, we'll catch you right back here. Later.